So I think
Totally.
the question on everyone's mind is like, when is this going to end? And then I'm going to connect that with the FOMC meeting that happened today, where everyone was expecting, a 25 basis points drop, but Powell just came in there and he just came in swinging. He's like, you know what? We're going to drop it 50 basis points. So, Sam, what are your thoughts on this? Is this going to be bullish for the Bitcoin price? When's this consolidation going to ever end? Are we or are we stuck at 58K till the end of time?
No, I think these rate cuts are kind of notable, but really the rate cuts have started from other major central banks for the last couple of months. You had the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, ECB, all start cutting rates, and now the Fed has finally followed. And people will say that it's because of the weak economic data that has come in, and they're getting scared and spooked about a recession. I think we all know what it's really about, and it's the fiscal situation. In August this year, the fiscal deficit increased 90 billion more than people expected. And over the last 12 months, we exceeded $2 trillion. And that's when the unemployment rate is still at historically low levels. And the economy is kind of like trucking along. There's some weak data points here and there, and it's scaring people, but nothing's terrible right now. And there's a lot of green shoots in the economic data as well that doesn't get a lot of attention. So you got to ask yourself, why is Jerome Powell coming out now and cutting rates, not 25 basis points, but 50? And I think it's because the fiscal situation. I mean, look at the interest expense. It's getting ridiculous. And, pretty soon, Luke Roman shared a chart that interest expense is going to outpace defense spending. And if they refuse to cut entitlements because of political issues, and just difficult to do, right? As well as defense spending in a period where geopolitical tensions are rising, well, what can they control? Well, they can control the interest expense, and they can do that by cutting rates, right? And so I think that's what this is really about. And it just points to the real driver of inflation as well, which is the government spending and the fiscal side of the equation. And what's interesting is that interest rates, I mean, come on, it's when the debt gets to these levels, this is the fiscal dominance where interest rate policy actually becomes pretty ineffective, both at stopping inflation and then arguably at stimulating it, because a lot of people locked in really low interest rates at fixed, 30-year mortgages, or corporations termed out their debt to 2030, 2032 at low interest rates. So honestly, like, I don't really see how cutting rates is really going to impact economic activity that much, unless it gets to below 3.5%, or really maybe after a few rate cuts, maybe we start to see some stimulative activity to the economy. But just one cut here and there, like, I don't really see how that's going to stimulate things, given how much people have these like long-term fixed debt at really low rates from the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's the what fascinates me the most, Sam, and Lynn has done incredible work on this. You have done incredible work on this. James Lavish, I think, coined the term the debt spiral, something like that. Clearly, this is unsustainable. But when do things break? Because it seems like us Bitcoiners have been like, this is absurd. They're printing records amount of money. Like, this is ridiculous. There's no way they can keep this up. But it always just seems like they can keep kicking that can down the road. Like, when will things get to a point where just the interest on the debt alone it gets to levels where it causes instability, politically, financially, for the country? And then what are the implications for that, for the world? Because the U.S. is the leader, really. So when's this going to end? And I mean, there's no way the answer to that, but let's speculate, right? Because it just seems like they can just keep doing this endlessly.
Well, that's the privilege that you talk about, being the global reserve currency. You can definitely do this for longer when you are that. And you asked, like, when this breaks. I think there's a couple of different ways that could happen. One is that countries in this global economy, in this global, dollar reserve system, basically say enough is enough, and they start to ditch the dollar for alternatives, and they stop buying our debt, that could be really troublesome, right? Because we have to keep the charade going. We have to keep issuing more and more debt. We need to find buyers of that debt. And I guess that goes down to, if we lose control of the longer end of the yield curve. So if we see interest rates on the long end start to really soar upwards because there's not enough demand for them and nobody's buying them, obviously that's going to increase a lot of interest expense as well. And so that's problematic, because something the Fed can do if nobody's buying the treasury bonds. And then,
I mean, but isn't the Fed buying the treasury bonds themselves? I mean,
well, then
technically,
you become Argentina, right? So
Mhm.
then you do the Argentina playbook, where you just monetize the debt with the central bank, and then when it breaks is when people lose faith in the currency completely. That's the ultimate breaking point, is when people just completely lose faith in the currency. Which, I mean, I'm not even going to try to guess when that would be. But you asked me when this all breaks, that would be the case. Now, it doesn't have to be a complete crash or a break. There are more optimistic paths out of these high debt levels, which one of them being productivity miracles brought about by, technological advancements. Bitcoin might be part of that. And so that's the more optimistic view. They could also stop spending. That's not going to happen, and the deficit just keeps going up. So, if they did any kind of austerity at this point with the leverage in the system, it would be extremely painful, extremely painful. But that would kind of at least really slam the brakes on these things, these developments. Or they could let inflation run high, and then it's a balancing act. So if they let inflation run, how much can the public stomach that, and for how high and for how long, before there's more like civil unrest and things like that. And so there's various outcomes here, different paths forward. I like to think Bitcoin's a part of the solution, and perhaps its ability to allow people to save in a money that can't be inflated, which leads to more investment and economic growth and more innovation. Having a monetary technology could help spur other innovations and inventions, because we're able to save and invest for long-term projects and innovations. That's kind of a long-term outlook. It's definitely, when you look at the debt situation, it's definitely dire. It seems like it's baked in the cake. As Stanley Druckenmiller says, the time to look at the entitlements and start to restructure things was like yesterday. and so it's definitely, there's a lot of issues on the horizon, and I think people are starting to become more aware of it in the mainstream media, as well as even large financial institutions like the IMF, World Bank. Jerome Powell himself, you got the Fed chairman himself saying it's unsustainable. I mean, that's extremely notable. Usually it was just Bitcoiners and gold bugs slamming the table about this like 5 years ago. And now, after COVID and all the money printing that happened, now everybody's kind of aware, like, this is a problem.